Hey, everybody. Today for you, podcast number 026. Today's podcast is titled The Deep Water. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. I'm Dr. Pete Lombardi, and this is the Limitless Life Network podcast, where we flesh out the limitations that are preventing you from reaching your goals and living the life that you deserve. Today, we have a special guest. Josh Lewis is joining us on the podcast. Josh is a consummate entrepreneur, always learning and creating. He created Cove Movement, which is not just a gym, it's a community of people all striving to live and move more courageously. He has his own podcast called the Cove Movement Podcast and the Cove Movement Farm Co-op. Josh is a husband, a father, and he loves Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which he trains with that all the time on top of training in his gym. So welcome to the podcast today, Josh.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Pete.
Yeah, no problem. Well, you had me on your podcast, so super excited that you chose to accept my offer to be on this podcast. So today, we don't necessarily have 5 points for you, but I do have a lead-in story for everybody. And it really comes from a teaching in the Bible. And it really talks about when Jesus was up against the edge of a lake one day. He was teaching to a group of people, and the crowd got so big that he saw a couple of empty boats, and he asked Simon to take him out into the shallow water so he could just kind of get a little space from the crowd. And when he finished teaching, he asked Simon to go out into the deep water and cast out the nets. And Simon kind of was, a bit wanting to not do it because they fished all night and caught nothing. And but he said, you know what, I'm just going to listen to you and do what you say as my teacher. And he goes out into the deep water, lets down the nets, and he catches so many fish that he can't bring the nets in. He had to call for a second boat. And when they finally loaded all the fish into both boats, they began to sink and they had to get to shore because they were just overwhelmed with the blessings that were found in the deep water. So the moral of the story is that maybe we all want to live in the shallow waters of safety and comfort, but the real blessings in life are really out in the deep water. So Josh, being an entrepreneur, he's done some pretty challenging things in his life. So I guess my leadoff question is, from limitation standpoint, what do you see, Josh, as holding so many people back? What would you say is like one of the top things that are really holding people back?
Well, so many people want security,
Okay,
and when you play it safe, you generally get security.
true.
So when you're in that zone, the uncomfortable, the unknown, the scary, the security is much less and unknown. And
Hmm.
that's fearful for a lot of people. And so, I've always told myself, all the gold and the opportunity and the success really comes when you're pushing that limit with new endeavors, learning, meeting new people. And yeah, I'd say most people, they need to, be okay with not being as secure and dive deeper. And you're going to fail. That's the thing. We always talk about this, but say 10 times you go out into that deep water, one time works, your whole life can change.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Like people think about the one time isn't what they think about, is it?
Mhm.
Where it works. They think about what could, all the potential things that are going to go wrong if they take the risk,
Mhm.
you know?
Well, and judgment, from friends and family,
Mm,
that's a big thing is we don't want our image to be negatively viewed upon.
hmm.
And so again, with security, we just play it safe, but I would rather be, and I say this all the time, but I'd rather be the man in the center of the arena trying, right?
Right.
Covered in blood and sweat and get my head chopped off and fail. But I'm trying. I'm the one there. I don't want to be the person in the stands. And so when I go after, whether it's a physical goal, business goal, anything that I'm pursuing, I think to myself all the time, at least I'm out there trying. That's the best that I can do.
Yeah, I agree 100% in regard to that. I would hate to, that's where regret lives is, always looking back in life and wondering what could have happened or what should have happened or, man, I wish I did this or I wish I did that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so I was thinking about like some of the things that people come up with, other things besides, well, relationships. How important are relationships and a community to people when it comes to that?
Wow, I think it's almost everything. You are the average of the top 5 people you spend the most time and energy with.
Mhm.
And so, if I find myself like in a lull or not as motivated as I should be, I'm looking at who I'm spending energy with.
Mm,
And it's for me, it's been a game changer. You only need 2 or 3, maybe 4 mentors, really good people to guide you, maybe 1. You don't need to be the popular person, right? Like with 10, 20, 30 people that you're close to all the time to help you. It's 1 to 4, I think, and having conversations and asking like questions. What are they reading? What are they doing? That's what sets you up to create a bigger vision for your life. And I see too many people hanging out with people that don't align with where they want to go. And without even really diving too much deeper than that, I can really have an idea of where their future is going to end up.
so that brings me to the thought, like, say somebody is like feeling stuck like that,
Mhm.
and they're hanging out with family and friends that they've always had and hung out with. What makes one just say, "I'm gonna spend less time with those people"? Like, what would be a good way for somebody to, like, start to do that? Start to shift from, the relationships that they have and always have had and that they're comfortable with and used to. How do they break out of that mold and shift to, just finding other people or,
Yeah,
changing their habit?
I wouldn't look at it as much as spending less time with the people that you normally spend time with. It would be spending more time with new people that could create opportunities. And then you're going to have less time in the end for your old peer group. Okay. So I think emails, phone calls, it's just, you have to put yourself out there. I just committed next week to have lunch with a guy. We have some stuff in common. He's worked for himself, entrepreneur for 25 years.
Mhm.
I have no idea what I'll get from that, if anything. Could be a
Right.
total waste of time, but it also could be a game changer. And I don't go into these relationships with necessarily expectations, but I'm an open book to learn, to listen, and to observe. And then maybe that particular lunch doesn't go anywhere business wise, but then he introduces me to someone else, right?
Mhm.
But th- if you're spending time with more people like that and you're filling your time and your week with that, you're going to have less time for your old peer group that in many cases is holding you back. And that's a hard pill to swallow. James Fitzgerald from OPEX Fitness told me this back in 2007 because I was semi depressed. I was out of college, didn't have any really vision for my life. And he said, if help as many people as you can that align with your values and put everything into those people, even if it's just one person, and
Mm.
then see what stems from that. And it changed my life. That one piece of advice took me from having a cubicle job. I was unhappy. I was not healthy or not what I'm striving to be now.
Mhm.
And I reorganized my thoughts in terms of who I want to spend time with. And, here we are, 2023.
Well, I think one of the things that James said in that statement, and I want to highlight that is see what you can do for other people first.
Mhm.
A lot of times people go into the idea is, oh, I'm gonna meet this person and see what I can get from them instead of what can I bring to help their life and better their life, because that's what I would say is like more of the law of reciprocity, that not that you're putting stuff out there to get something in return, but if there's a good fit there and you honestly can help somebody, then eventually maybe they can help you. Maybe,
Hmm.
maybe not, but at least you did something that was positive. It's positive action moving you in a positive direction.
And it's creating value.
It's creating value. That's
And that's how you know you're onto something, whether it's from a business standpoint, relationship standpoint, maybe as a career and you're getting a promotion, right?
mhm.
If you can learn to create value for people, the planet, or animals, there's an array of opportunities available. But you can't look at these opportunities like you said, what am I getting from this person, or what am I making from a salary perspective, or when do I get
Right.
that next 3% raise, or when do I really get lucky? Those are all really short-term mindsets.
Yeah.
The long-term relationships, with you and handful of people that have walked with me for 15 years, we're not in these relationships for short-term payoffs,
Right.
right? We push each other and we guide each other, but that's what makes it exciting. But you got to get away from that, Friday paycheck mentality.
Sure, sure. What's another limitation? What's another thing that, I guess is holding people back? We talked about relationships for
Mhm.
sure hold people back, but what else is holding people back in your opinion?
Well, yeah, this is something I'm talking about more and more now, but most people are really poor money managers.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is, dinners out and vehicles they can't afford and a house they can't afford, and they're just blowing money in these maybe 8 to 12 different areas. Maybe
Okay.
not a lot of money all at once, but it's leaking. And then they will say in the same sentence, they can't afford coaching. They can't
Oh,
afford
yeah.
a mentor program. They can't go on this trip, a seminar. When I started the gym, 2011, I put on my credit card a $3,000 sales course. I didn't have that money. I had student loans. I did a lot of things wrong. But I knew that if I said what I was going to do was going to make happen, I needed to learn how to sell. So I remember charging it and I hit submit and I just gulped. But I could still be here today, right? Like 2023 saying, "Oh, I'm going to do a sales course. I'm going to learn sales, this and that." And I've done that with a bunch of stuff. We bought a large tract of land last year. It's just like that was uncomfortable. I've built a few houses. That's uncomfortable. It's all just uncomfortable, but if you don't need to be wealthy to do most of this, right? But you got to be organized enough to allocate it into areas that are going to pay off the best for a long-term ROI. And I don't even mean like, dividends and interest. I just mean like your personal growth.
Sure, sure.
I would say most people, listening to this and our podcast are blowing on average 500 to 1,000 a month, just not even realizing it.
It very well could
And
be.
now imagine if you put that into personal growth.
Sure.
It'd be life changing.
And the interesting thing you said there too was like, and we kind of chuckled about it, which was the part where you hit submit, right?
Hmm.
You hit send, and you're like, ugh, and that's the deep water,
Yeah.
right? Like that is that moment where you're like, oh, I got to go forward and do this, and I can't believe I just did this. What was I thinking? You start having like second doubts, buyer's remorse,
Yeah.
all those things start to creep in, and those are not like that's not what God has in store for you. He doesn't have doubt and worry in store for you. Those are man-made concepts. Those are
Mhm.
things that you're bringing on yourself. And reality is that what your hopes and dreams are really, those are your pursuits that God lays on your heart. And
Mhm.
when it's aligning correctly, that's when things take off, and you just have to lean into that more and trust
Yeah, when we got the call in April that we got that land,
that.
that's that gulp I was talking of that you were just talking about. I'm sitting there at
Exactly.
the dining room table and I'm like, "Wow, we just bought that and it's ours," and whatever, right?
Yes.
Um, but I also believe that, like, God will put opportunities in front of you that you are strong enough to do.
Yeah.
I see too many people force too many things, and it's just not a good fit. You're
Hmm.
forcing it. It's not
Right.
being no, it shouldn't be on a silver platter, right? You got to work hard and, find your opportunities. But um yeah, I think that you're given the dose that you can handle, and more people need to say yes to more things.
Yeah, there's a rule of discernment that I think that everybody has to, you have to do your due diligence, but at the same time, overanalyzing things can also cripple you at the same time. You have to have some level. At some point, you jump.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to, take a dive off into the deeper water. It's not gonna. You're not gonna be lowered in gently. Sometimes you just
No.
have to jump off the end of the diving board, so to speak, and that's when everything happens. Then that's when you have to start swimming.
Well, and that's why like self-help books are the number one area
They
that they
are
sell, because most people are just reading books, listening to podcasts, and they're consuming content,
right.
but they're not actually doing it, right? We have a lot of like self-regarded experts out there,
Sure.
but they're not really even doing that. And so, yeah, more action, less procrastination. But yeah, the money thing, it's you don't need to be wealthy. You don't need 10,000 more dollars. Like, it's all these excuses that people say, "Oh, well, if I had this, I would do this."
Mm.
Uh, no, I'm a walking proof of that. You are in many instances. A lot of people that come from, being scared and not having a lot of resources to get started, you make it work. You
Yeah.
absolutely make it work.
Yeah, it's amazing how it comes back to. I remember, my first lease of an office, and I thought, oh my gosh, I cannot believe how am I ever going to be able to afford to pay that every month?
Hmm.
And then it wasn't hard at all because my business grew so much, and then I needed to get out of there once the lease was up, and I was like, I got to find a place to buy because I can't keep leasing. I'm just throwing my money away, and I bought a building that I needed to renovate. And now I'm like, how am I going to ever do all this? How's this ever going to pay off? And it was one of the best investments I ever made.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I think you should be nervous. Like,
yeah, a little bit,
yeah, I don't
right?
think it should be to the extent that you don't move forward, but that is normal, right?
Right.
Especially if there's substantial money involved, like yeah, things can go wrong and whatever. And you play
Sure.
all those scenarios. But again, if you do your due diligence and it's truly where your heart lies and your vision, which we could do a whole separate podcast on that. But if it aligns with that, again, I think there's more opportunity out there for people than they think.
Yeah, one of the things that I remember reading or learning about with regard to money was your self-talk. And one of the things that I've always found myself saying, because I heard it my whole life growing up, was that I can't afford that. I
Hmm.
can't afford that. It was always it was a great excuse to hold on to my money and to save it for a rainy day. And it would always limit me from ever trying things or doing things. And then I realized that maybe it wasn't that I had extra money that I was saying I can't afford it for, but it was really more of like a scarcity mindset. Like I was never going to have enough money to afford things.
Hmm.
And so I stopped saying that. And
Hmm.
if I truly didn't have the resources at the time, instead I would say, I choose not to buy this now because I'm going to wait until I'm more financially secure, because it was a choice. It's a choice whether you purchase something or invest in something or not. And that money is not the inhibitor of that,
Hmm.
right? Money is really just a form of energy. It's that energy that you've put into something. It's the value you've created. So you just have to go out and create more value.
Hmm.
Um,
And I
s-
think putting that pressure on yourself in some instances is good,
for sure.
because that's how we started this talk, was that with the security, people
Mhm.
want security and I want everything to stay ABC. But then when you throw a new challenge or endeavor out there, it sort of finagles everything
Mhm.
different, and that's good though, because those times for me, it's like, whoa, okay, now you, whether you work harder or you get smarter or something to make that work, and then you look back a year, 2, 3 years, it just works. Here's an example, like with the land that I bought, where our gym is in our house now.
Yes.
I was working out on a Saturday morning, and I get a phone call, and it's the owner, and we didn't have a contract yet. We had a verbal accepted offer on the land, and the price went up like $8,000 just because she called a realtor. And I'm thinking, oh man, and then part of me is like the safety part's like, screw it, I'm not doing it. And I called my dad, great mentor, and he said, in less than a year from now, you will forget you spent that much more money on it.
There's some good advice.
And I said, okay. And I called the owner back, and I think she was shocked that I called back like 20 minutes later. And I was like, all right, I'll make that work. And she's like, okay. But think about this. Like I could have said no.
Right,
And over $8,000, I would still be in a much, much smaller, one quarter the size of facility,
right,
not modern or updated, much smaller house. It's just the whole thing would have been scaled so small, and it was great to start, right? But
right.
again, if the vision was to grow the brand, yeah, you got to take that, and you swallow that $8,000 pill and you do it. And it's not like the money's just sitting there. I can guarantee listeners that it's not.
It's not. And
But you make it work.
yeah, but it was really just it just showed you the value of the investment was greater, and the
Yeah,
return ended up being greater,
yeah.
probably greater than you even perceived.
Yeah, by 5x.
Isn't that
Yeah.
something? Like you think it's going to be great, but it's actually 5 times greater than what you thought it was going to be.
Well, and here is another short story. So we build the gym, and then a small house behind that, very nice little setup. Then a year later, I get a call, and it's a lady that wants me to build an addition onto
Right.
the gym. So I'm just getting
I
settled,
remember
and like the grass seed hasn't even fully come
taking
in. Yeah, and here I is, someone wanted me to double the size of the gym for in exchange for a 5-year lease and all of this, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But then I'm like, well, wait a second, this sort of makes sense,
right.
and we did it, and here
Yep.
we are. We're almost 4 years into a 5-year lease, and it's worked really well for everyone.
Yeah.
But those were some gut checks for sure. The land, last year that we got, that was gut check. Um, I'm just waiting for the next one. We'll
Yeah.
see.
So, what's another limitation that we could think about that's holding people back? We talked about finances. People think they want to stay super secure in finance, so they're afraid to take risks. Relationships, we hit
Hmm.
that pretty good.
Well, physical.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, you know, so many people, they look at, let's say, running, they don't run, and
Hmm.
then they're like, oh, I could never run a marathon, right?
Sure.
Or I could never, deadlift my body weight with no pain. But what so many people are missing is the step-by-step process long term to get
Mm,
there. Like walk 2 miles,
yeah.
right? For 6 weeks, and then you add a mile, and then you start, 30-second run, 30-second walk. You build to that marathon over 2 years. And that's a huge limitation. We hear it all the time, like, with some of the more advanced stuff with handstands or muscle ups or this, or that. I could never do that. It's like this thing, I couldn't afford it. It's the same
Right. It's the
thing,
same
same
thing.
thing.
Yeah.
But it's because the culture now is so centered on 30 days, 60 days, 90-day challenges. And
Right.
it's like, well, yeah, you definitely can't do it in that amount of time. But if it's a goal long term, you're going to block that out slowly and slowly make progress. Like with the swimming with me, I'm not a good swimmer, wasn't a good swimmer, hired a swim coach, and then 2 years of trials and tribulations and learning. Year three, I'm swimming 1 mile lengths in open water,
Yeah. Talk
and I
about
didn't know. Wasn't on a swim team, wasn't nothing. I was literally like the person with their head above the water, looks like they're drowning.
right.
Now I'm pretty efficient swimmer, but it was 3 years.
3 years, but you're swimming in deep water now.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Not much room for error.
Deep cold water.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and that's the scary thing, right? Like for someone to just dump a non-swimmer out into the middle of the lake and say swim,
Mhm.
that's different. That
Yeah,
is scary. That's actually dangerous, right? That
yeah.
because you're not suited for that yet, but you built to that, you grew to that. And that's
Mhm.
really, I see that with people as well, is that they get so deep into a hole
Mhm.
that they don't realize to get out of the hole is just a little bit at a time.
And we live in a culture, like I said before, that wants to educate, educate, read, read, right? Like
Right,
part of building that process out is that.
right,
Like, how do I run a marathon in 2 years? Or how do I swim a mile in cold water in 2 years? Like, building that out should be fun and exciting for people.
right.
But again, they want to do it tomorrow or in a
Sure.
month from now, or they want the Instagram selfie with the success and across the finish line. But like, that process should be rewarding, and it should be fun to
Right.
say, today I walked 2 miles and I didn't have any pain. awesome.
Right.
In 2 days, I'm going to try 2.5, and then I'm going to do a day off. Like, and then you look back in a year and you're like, well, I'm running a 10K.
Sure.
Great. Not at a marathon, but I'm getting there. And you're following that process. And then you look back in 2, 3 years, 99% of people didn't do anything. So you're much farther ahead of them. And here you are running a marathon, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Like anything that is physical, there's usually some level of pain and discomfort in it. And so when most people feel pain and discomfort, they want to give up, they want to quit, they want to shy away from pain.
Mhm.
Yeah, your body is meant to avert pain because it's a signal to prevent you from hurting yourself. But at the same time, a certain dose of it is not a bad thing, especially if you're able to recover from that pain.
When again, it depends on what you say you want to do.
Sure,
If it is a marathon or swim or handstand, like, yeah, there's going to be, you know, some pain involved and, discomfort and soreness and stuff. Yeah,
sure.
for sure.
And then once you get that carrot, say you run the marathon, you get the handstand, you get the selfie, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, then you get, and then is
Then
on
what?
topic, then you get the depression.
Sure.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother topic too. But like, if the goal is like that's the epitome for you and you're going to self-define yourself with that at such an extent. I've coached people for 13 years full time, and I've dealt with many people that identify with the end goal too strongly,
Yeah.
and it's about 6 months of you know depression for them. They've
Yeah.
identified with it, and then the process is over. So you better love the process, and then listening to this podcast, like, understand you're gonna feel let down after all the bells and whistles go off and the
Sure.
thumbs up and the hearts and all this stop, and you go to work on Monday and life moves on.
Yeah.
You better be ready to refocus. It could be not another fitness endeavor, but you need something to put that energy towards. Because if you're training for, let's say, an Ironman, and you train 20 hours a week for 9 months,
And then
and
it's
then
over.
and it's over, and you realize, you get home Sunday night and Monday work starts, and no one really cares, and it goes on. You need you need to fill that void.
Sure.
So
Yeah, I experienced that myself, not knowing that that's what I was experiencing. I just thought it was like I trained for a goal to run a race or whatever it might be, a challenge of some sort. Then it was over with, and I was like, okay, now what do I do? Because I didn't really have that, and then I realized I wanted to just train for my health.
yeah.
I wanted to train for longevity, and I wanted to train for being able to do things as I aged,
And that's a question for everyone to answer, is why is that your goal?
Right.
So I would say in the majority of instances, it's the goal for the wrong reason. And that's another pill to swallow. But like, um, if you like running and you enjoy that and nature and fresh air and building aerobic capacity and how you feel, then at the end of the marathon, you won't feel let down,
Right.
because then you're going to take 1 or 2 days off. And then what are you going to do Wednesday? You're going
Right.
to go run, and then you're
Yeah.
going to find another race. But if it's to self-inflate the ego and to build you in a false image, that's going to be a big letdown, because for the most part, no one really cares you're running the marathon. That's another, sorry, but
Just
that's,
a very, very small
yeah,
few people
your
that
wife or husband might, or your kid might text you and say congrats, but then
Yeah,
life goes on.
exactly.
So enjoy that process.
Enjoy the process. That's really good advice. So, any other limitations that you can think of besides physical limitations, relationships as far as limitations,
I would say,
monetary?
I would say for people to just ask themselves that question in their own heart, what they think their own limitations are.
Yeah,
They know. Most people do. And I know that some of it is subconscious and habits, but if you really sit with someone down one on one, like we do at consultations, right?
right.
They know, there's just a lot of areas. It could be past trauma, negative experiences, a poor marriage,
Hmm.
it could be a big failure as, a kid, and then they were shunned, and now they're all messed up and play it super safe.
Hmm.
And I have empathy for all of that. But I think, we could come up with quite a list, but most people understand in their situation what's limiting them.
Yeah.
It could be, this sounds bad, but like it could be parents,
Sure.
it could be siblings, right? Like
Sure.
I went through this where it was like your high school buddies,
Hmm.
they're living a certain lifestyle and you get out of college and you're still friends and Friday night, Saturday night, and then football on Sunday. And it's like, well, I don't really want to be doing that. And so making that switch,
Hmm.
difficult. It's like they're all good people and we get along, but it's not where I want to head.
Yeah.
And, so it'd be a question for people to ask themselves.
Yeah. And I think the key factor there is really just being brutally honest with yourself.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing. I think we tell ourselves stories that I guess feed our ego a little bit and kind of give us the excuses to stay where we're at in that
Mhm.
safety area. But when you sit down and you can be brutally honest with yourself about yourself, you'll discover things that don't necessarily flatter you, but when you bring them into the light, then you have the opportunity to move past them, which is a beautiful thing. That's where growth takes place.
Yeah. And, listening to you and I talk, right? Like people can get the perception of that they have to have the gas pedal down, right? They got to be going hard and this and that. Like you got to just define that for yourself.
Right.
It could be you're identifying as like a really great parent and like that's it. That's what you're putting your effort in. That's amazing.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not like buying businesses and blah blah. Like so don't get jacked up about that, but you got to figure out what's important to you and then that's where you're looking to improve upon and get rid of your limitations.
Sure. For sure. Yeah, and that's really just getting back to values.
Yeah.
What do you really value at your core? I know you've mentioned before, like how do you figure out your values, and you always say what?
It's where you spend all your time, money, energy, and thoughts.
Time, money, energy, and thoughts. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think people get into a rut and they're valuing things if they when they really start to look at them, they don't really necessarily truly love. You
Yeah.
ever
Well,
see that? Like somebody's stuck in a rut and their time and their money is going into something, but they don't really necessarily like that idea.
they like it enough to do it.
They like it enough to do it.
But what the other side of the coin is saying is that I have different goals in life. And so the goals aren't aligning with their values, and that sucks.
Right.
That leads to frustration. That's why like 90 some percent of people don't achieve the goals that they
Right.
set because they have these five values over here. And then on the other side is a goal. And if we know that values are defined by where you spend your time, money, energy, and thoughts, by default, the goal will never happen unless the two align.
Right.
So you need to either change the goal, which we've done in many instances with lots of people, and that relieves them of lots of stress in many cases. Or they have to change your values, which means you have to change your lifestyle, make
Right.
sure you have to change your peer group and all of that. And
Hmm.
so when you're setting goals, make sure that it aligns with that, or set the goal and make sure that then you're changing your lifestyle to align with that. I know it sounds simple, but it's that's the process for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think a good reminder for everyone is everyone does have a hidden genius.
Nice.
Um, it's easy to think that you're a nobody,
Mm,
but everyone is put here. You had a 1 in 400 trillion chance of being you,
mm,
and so regardless of where you are today, I say in a year from now, your whole life can be totally different in
yeah,
any of the areas that we were talking about.
for sure.
And life can pivot too. So, you could be doing really well where you are now, but then change course and do great there. But you're here for a reason.
Yeah.
And circle back to how are you creating value? How are you helping people, the planet, or animals? And
Mm,
in many cases, that's what that comes down to,
or all three.
or all three.
Well, thank you, Josh. If you want to get in contact with Josh, website is co-movement.com, right?
Yep. That's it.
And so, yeah, I'm sure you could message him through there. We can put that in the show notes as well. But I want to thank you for being on the podcast today. This is obviously a different format and a little bit longer, but I'm sure you all got something out of it. But that's all we have for this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. Be sure to tune in each and every week to stay connected, be inspired, and keep moving toward your best life by stripping away your limitations.